Hello and welcome to the weekly astrology and spirituality show for week commencing the 14th of March with Alyssa and Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, we know it's been a very, very intense week for Central Europe. And of course, COVID is not at an end and there are spikes going on around the world too. So there's a lot for us to get through. In terms of the astrology, this week continues to see Venus and Mars tightly bound together in the sign of humanity, Aquarius. You wouldn't think that really, would you, with what's going down? But Venus and Mars in this area are seeing huge amounts of acts of kindness and humanitarianism, people fundraising, certainly in Europe, driving vehicles to the Polish border to drop off supplies. Really inspiring stuff. And then we've got some countries, notably on the border of Ukraine, in terms of Romania, Moldova and Poland, where the citizens of those countries are just absolute heroes for the support that they've been given the evacuees from Ukraine. It's an interesting thing about how life has changed in Britain, that we have a kind of agenda which is very much about protecting our borders, and that's really been challenged as this week's gone on. The government's position has been very, very slow to understand the human dimension of this displacement of 2.5 million people. And there was a league table that someone shared on Twitter showing Poland at the top of the amount of people they'd taken in, absolutely hundreds of thousands, and at the bottom was Britain, 50. Absolutely, totally disappointing. Now, you might not agree with me on this because Poland is, after all, a very, very Catholic country, very conservative Catholic country in terms of things like pro-life. But Britain has become more and more of a secular country in recent times. And I just feel the compassion that people in Eastern Europe have shown for their fellow neighbours has been fantastic. And now, very slowly, the British government seems to be waking up that there is an appetite to help people in this country, and that is absolutely really timely. So that Venus and Mars in the humanitarian sign of Aquarius is working in some ways. The problem is, from the middle of this week, they both go into a broad right angle with the modern ruler of Aquarius, Uranus. Now, Uranus hasn't been in the sign of Taurus since 1937. That's when it started. I think it ended in about 1943. And we know what those dates coincided with. Huge, huge change in the world and a lot of conflict. So Mars heading into a right angle with Uranus, which becomes exact on the 22nd of March, can lead to a pushback against repression, or it could see repression being used to limit people's freedoms. And we know that's going on in Russia, because if Russia was so absolutely in the right in its policies, and I'm not saying that NATO and the West haven't made mistakes over the years in the way that they've gone about things, because clearly they have taken action against countries without necessarily being absolute hard and fast evidence to mitigate those attacks. But I do feel that the attitude of the Russian government to information proves that actually they don't have a worthy campaign. Otherwise, why would they need to lock up anyone who shows a different opinion? So for all the faults of the West, for all the faults of social media and people sounding off and being keyboard warriors, at least you're allowed to do it. And I was watching a very brave lady who was the editor of one of the newspapers there, the more liberal newspapers, which has been closed down, has decided to stay in Moscow, and she's keep speaking her truth. Honestly, just absolutely incredible. But from the middle of this week, I think there is the potential for an escalation, but there is also the potential for a pushback. So that's going to be interesting. Now, of course, we have on the 18th the full moon in Virgo. Virgo energy is practical, it's precise, it's about making sure that things function in an efficient way. The gathering of energy that we've got in Pisces this week, including Mercury, gives us the opportunity if this war wasn't going on, to really embrace a much more spiritual dimension. So for me, the full moon, which also features Pluto, but in a positive way, is just saying we need to toggle between the more feeling and spiritual dimension of life and the practical reality. And Pluto's saying that if we can embrace some kind of realignment or rebalancing, and the change that comes from that from the middle of this week can be really good. But then on Sunday, we have the spring equinox, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. So London, New York, Los Angeles, and also Delhi, it's all on the 20th. But on the 21st, it is Sydney, so the following week. So the spring equinox is the start of the Western tropical zodiac, which is based on the seasons and divided into 4 equal quadrants of 13 weeks. And each of the signs that starts that quadrant off is a cardinal sign, very much to do with leadership. So the sun moving into the sign of Aries is a fresh beginning, an opportunity to spring clean, if you like, in the Northern Hemisphere. If you are down south, then you'll probably ruin the fact that the days are getting a bit shorter now and the sun isn't quite as warm as it was a while ago. But Western tropical astrology is a Mediterranean construct. But this is a key time because it's the beginning of the new journey that lasts 12 months of the sun working its way through each of the 12 zodiac signs. But clearly, because we still have, after this spring equinox, Mercury, Jupiter, the traditional ruler of Pisces, and Neptune still in Pisces, it's not all about get-go on the front foot. I think we're still going to be mourning and drawing on our reserves to help those who are less fortunate as best we can in any way at all. It doesn't matter if your focus is not necessarily on the Ukraine, but this consciousness raising that's going to become really full or full on once Pluto moves into Aquarius next year on a temporary basis. It moves there full time in 24. That's really telling us that we've got a new reality is going to be coming through, and it needs to be based much more on community and much less on materialism and power of borders, which, where's that got us in the last few weeks? Now, in terms of the Hermetic Wheel, what do we have this week?
Well, just before we go into that, I'd like to say if you want to watch Patrick's Virgo full moon video, or indeed the spring equinox video, the links for those will be in the description box beneath this video.
Oh, thank you so much, Mrs. Arundell.
You're welcome, Mr. Arundell. So we have actually a card of real hope and joy for the entirety of this week. It's the Ten of Cups. The Ten of Cups is about negotiation, it's about family, it's about coming together. It could mean that there are new additions to a family. It could be that there is some sort of move to a new location. It's very much the end of a cycle. 10 is a completion. And so we're at the end of all the cups that have gone before. And that means that there is a completion in an emotional sense, because cups represent our emotional selves and our spiritual selves to a certain degree. So we're coming to the end of that cycle, and we can expect maybe some things to be, loose ends to be tied up, some confirmation of things that we've been perhaps waiting for. So that's, very much on a personal level, which is what the pip cards of tarot represent. The major cards are more to do with big things in our lives or big things in the world, but the pip cards are a more individual level, and that's why they can be so useful for us on a daily basis, really.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I was just thinking, in terms of that spring equinox video, if you do watch it, of course the sun is in the sign of Aries. It moves into the sign of Aries when that event occurs. It does actually forge a really helpful link with Pluto. And of course Pluto has been causing a lot of mischief. But when that event occurs, Pluto is squaring the moon still. When we had the winter equinox, or the winter solstice, the moon was opposite Pluto. Pluto can be about power, and we've seen how power has crushed people's homes, their dreams, their security. So that 13-week period, unfortunately, was uncannily prescient for what then unfolded. But there is one particular aspect in this new 13-week period which gives us a bit of hope, even though Mars is squaring with Uranus when this event unfolds, and that is that Mercury and Jupiter Jupiter, the ruler of Pisces, as I said before, Mercury, the planet of discussion, are actually conjunct in terms of the chart for Universal Central Time. They're conjunct in the 7th house of discussion and agreement. So we've really got to hope that something is going to come to pass in that regard very soon. So the 10 of Cups links into that. Now, you very kindly have shared lots of beautiful messages about Lisa's hair, which is really... No one's saying anything about my hair. I'm devastated. And thank you for all that, and lots of uplifting comments. And we had 3 suggestions for words of the week. So,
yes.
What are they?
So, Dawn suggested the word mantra, Krishna suggested the word indolence, and Janet suggested the word meditation. And the word that we pulled out of the celestial hat was meditation.
Right.
So thank you, Janet, for that.
Thank you to all 3 of you. And to
Do you know,
Janet.
Meditation is something that we're kind of constantly told, I feel, at the moment, that it's something we must be doing. And a lot of us don't know where to start. You know, where do you start? You know, how do you incorporate it into your day? And meditation isn't just about sitting on a beautiful rug with incense and, you know, a gong in the background, although that's lovely. Meditation is just when our mind sort of filters off to somewhere else where we can relax. Many of my best meditations have been when I've just been washing the dishes and you have your hands in the water and your mind just daydreams off. That's meditation. You know, you're switching yourself off to that chatter in your head. So a lot of us can do that. If we're very daydreamy, we probably spend a lot of time in meditation without realizing it. But it's just about giving ourselves a little bit of time to step away from the things that have been maybe going on. I don't do this enough. Just to take that 5 minutes
We
out.
are the ultimate plate spinners,
Yes.
and a few plates have got broken this week.
I actually broke a plate last night.
Figuratively and
1 o'clock in the morning.
Actually.
Shattered. Yeah, actually. It was like one of my favourite plates.
So one of the things we could do, sort of looking at it in a more practical way, especially if you're someone who maybe doesn't necessarily feel quite so easy with some kind of concept that, you know, maybe has connotations for you in your mind about what it might mean. Is it linked to Buddhism? I don't really know what Buddhism is. Do I have to really go into a state of such higher relaxation that I become so totally unaware of anything else? Those kind of questions I think are really, really understandable. But what we could do, I think, is just become aware of where our shoulders are, where our breath is. You know, we're all rushing around so much these days. We have all these labour-saving devices but have less time than ever before. So could we just let our shoulders go down a bit? Just be aware if our back is bending forwards. Is there any tension in our jaw? Just letting a little bit of breath come down our body, just in a really practical way. And if you're watching Coronation Street when you do it, then that's fine. It doesn't have to be some kind of spiritual ideal. I think it can be very practical for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you want it to be a spiritual ideal, that is beautiful as well. But I think for the majority of us in our everyday lives, just having that time out, you know, take a 5-minute meditation break from work. It used to be people go out for a smoke.
So
maybe they go out for a breathe.
Okay, I'm going to keep you to this then.
Okay, I will. That's my New Week's resolution.
Her meditation is watching doggy videos.
I know, I love... and TikToks.
So, we also had a few people entering the birthday chart winner. And I'm just going to don my glasses. I've got some glasses that are supposed to be non-reflective because a few people did say that I was looking, or was it behaving like an alien? Okay, the winner is Bertha T, because I'm not going to reveal Bertha's full identity. And Bertha was born on the 19th of March 1972 in Pottsville in Pennsylvania. Thank you so much for entering, Bertha, and I'm sorry to those guys who missed out. Now, the interesting thing about your situation, Bertha, is that your son, you may know this if you've ever actually had your chart prepared, your son is actually in the sign of Pisces. But being on the 19th of March it is possible some years that can be in the sign of Aries for some of that day. But your sun is at 29 degrees and 10 minutes in Pisces. That's known in astrology as the Anartic degree. Because if you think about it, there isn't a 30th degree in astrology. So the 29th degree, and we get through to 59 seconds, and then boom, the sun would have moved into Aries. So you are on the cusp, but it's said with Anartic degrees that they can confer a degree of difficulty in making our minds up at times. But I don't necessarily think that's going to be so applicable to you, because your sun is high in the sky in the 10th house, very much about taking responsibility and showing leadership. Also, you have Mercury in the 10th house, but it is alongside Chiron. So it does make me wonder if you have felt at times that your qualities and skills and hard work haven't always quite got the recognition that they deserve, but your ability to help others, particularly with your communicational skills, I think is very, very strong with Mercury next to Chiron. But the midpoint of your chart is actually 28 degrees in Aries. So the moon's 27 degrees. It loves being in the sign of Taurus. It's exalted here, but it is pretty close to Saturn. Saturn's in Gemini, so they are disassociate, but your moon is very close to Mars, so just a couple of degrees, well, about 1.5 degrees apart. So when it comes to your feelings, I think that in the 11th house there is the ability to be a bit more logical, a bit more Aquarius in your approach, if you like. Certainly very future orientated, but you also have Venus, the ruler of Taurus, in its dignity. And then you have the midpoint at 28 degrees in Aries in the 11th house. So friendships are important to you. I think you definitely can be a leader with this 10th house energy, which is very much in keeping with Capricorn, but also the midpoints in Aries, that other cardinal sign. So for you at the moment, the move in Pluto in the sky is actually bringing you some opportunities, but also potentially some challenges, because the move in Pluto is in your 7th house. It's been in your 7th house for some years now. I didn't have a chance to look, to be honest, but I think it would be from around about 2013-14. Some big changes may have gone on around relationships. But you're very lucky because Pluto's been forging a delightful trine with your Mars and your Moon relatively recently. And then when it does move into Aquarius, it's going to be forging a terrific trine with your Saturn. So I think some big changes are going to go on because Pluto's going to move across your 8th house cusp. So the issue isn't going to be so much about relationships, it's more where you're most invested, the more psychological side of life. Could be about business development or entrepreneurship, but that midpoint is clashing with Pluto. So I think there may be a relationship in your situation in Placidus, the 7th house of Pluto, the 11th house of the midpoint, that might be making way. Maybe it's a friendship, a group association, or an ideal you've really held very tightly. I think that may be under a degree of pressure at the moment, and maybe is moving out of your situation, or certainly a big relationship could be being in some way transformed. Also, when you were born, Pluto, again, disassociate in an opposition with the Sun. So I think if you need to say how you feel, you can be quite strident if you're put on the spot, particularly around balancing home and emotional issues, because your Pluto is in the 4th house. But the lovely thing about your chart is that Jupiter, although it's in its fall in Capricorn when you were born, it is right on your 7th house cusp. It's not quite in the 7th house, but I think it means that people see you as being quite a steadfast person, someone that they can rely upon. Now, in terms of your secondary progressions, which remember takes forward your life from the time you were born across those days in the ephemeris. So your sun is currently at 18 degrees Taurus. So the coming year, and it's in the 10th house still, is going to see some big changes around how you work, where you work, who you work with. Technology could be a feature of this. I think change is going to be so inevitable, I really wouldn't try to resist it. You also have the move in Uranus in the sky in a conjunction with your natal Venus at the moment. And because that's been squaring with Saturn over the last year, I think Saturn has been in your 8th house in Placidus. I think here too, maybe trying to earn a living but keeping in touch with your values has proved to be more challenging, and that may have caused some stress. So I think some tension and stress around either a professional, business or friendship situation. But that move in Sun is at 18 degrees in Taurus, but you have Mars and Venus in a beautiful conjunction in Gemini in the 11th house. So as much as some friendships may be making way, new ones can come, but Pluto's in a quincunx with those two. So again, it may feel in your progress chart, Pluto is in your 6th house of work, professional situation. In your progress chart, the 6th house is Pluto, but it's angling to Mars and Venus in your 11th house. So finding the kind of work you can do which matches your values or has the connection to others that I think is important to you. I think you are someone who really gets the team, and that is very, very lovely. But that may be challenged maybe by technological changes. It may be where you're living and the employment opportunities in that particular area. It may be professional advancement or training you're doing for yourself. If you would like to enter your details for the free birthday prize draw for week commencing the 21st of March, please feel free to do so under this video, or you can send me a direct email via my website. Now we have the modality, and what cards have you chosen this week?
Well, this week I've been really drawn to working with Archangel Gabriel, because this is said to be the archangel that helps us with communication. And I feel like more than ever we need some clear avenues of communication in the world right now. So there's been
a lot of misinformation, haven't there?
Yes.
And I predicted on last week's quarter moon, which was on Thursday, ordinarily a Gemini Pisces quarter moon can create gossip and sort of backstabbing. But because Neptune was in the mix as well, that's a very dissipating and evaporating and dissolving energy, and it can be very deceitful. And obviously some of the things that were claimed last week were just absolutely outrageous. Like, how can the world be outraged that a hospital's been bombed? This pathetic emotional reaction. That's pathetic in itself, that you'd even dare to utter those words. So so clarity is what we need.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the card, well, there was actually two that were stuck together, so I'm going to talk about both. The first one that came up said classes, and it says on here, learning is part of your higher calling. And the second card that came up was daily practice, and it says the more you practice your new skills, the more comfortable and confident you become. So they actually go together really well, don't they? I think sometimes in life we can be good at something, but just to have a piece of paper that says you're good at this can actually really help our confidence, because it's something that kind of gives us that validation. So it could be going back to school in some way, learning a new skill and practicing that skill, and knowing that anything new we're not going to be perfect at straight away, and that's okay. It's okay to make those mistakes along the way and get it wrong and mess things up.
Also, sorry to interject, is it the case that sometimes we won't have a piece of paper? Like in Germany, and I really respect this, to do any job professionally, you have to have, there's a particular name for it, you have to have this qualification for that specific field, which is good, because it probably does act as a protection in terms of consumer consumption of that service or product. But equally, it's very important for those people who haven't been fortunate enough to have a structured or formal education or training development, to try to understand the life experiences they have, which can be so colossal. And a lot of people say, well, I'm no good at that. I don't have this. It's a very British thing, I think, again. Important, even if you haven't been to college, don't underestimate all the skills that you have.
That is so spot on. And the other thing is, with that, sometimes we can spend so much time doing classes and courses that it becomes a tool for procrastination, that we don't actually get going with a new business or a new idea or whatever it is, because we think, oh, I'll just do one more class, or I'm not qualified enough, or I just don't know. Let's not use any of that as something to hold us back. Instead, think, okay, I've got the knowledge I have right now, I'm going to go for it with whatever tools I have.
That's brilliant.
I feel.
I'd like to also mention a very special person who's a follower of our show, been a follower of our show for a very long time, from when COVID first started, and that is Aleksandra, who we call a very special top fan. Aleksandra is right on the Polish-Ukrainian border. She's a teacher and a writer, an author of children's books. So we can put Aleksandra's children's book link under this video as well, so you can check that out, because I'm sure that would be a great boost for her morale at the moment. But I did write to her on Twitter this morning, and she has come back and said, she's really grateful that we've reached out, but she's right in the epicenter of what's going on in Ukraine. And so all of our thoughts should be for all of those supporting nations, but most of all for the people in Ukraine, but also for everyday Russians who are victims of this grand larceny, this grand deceit, who really, really believe what they're being told. And there's quite a lot of evidence of people who live in Ukraine phoning their parents back home, and there's huge arguments going on because they just don't believe that they would be bombing, the Russian Federation would be bombing civilian buildings. And of course we all know it's just a case of trying to destroy the infrastructure of the country completely. It's utterly ruthless. And an American journalist has also been killed in the last 24 hours just going about his job. So we must also be mindful of the role of the ordinary Russian citizen. We do have some fundamentalists in lots of different parts of the world, people who are very nationalistic or very left-wing and feel very passionately about things and are very politically driven. But for the most part, Russian people will be like ourselves, who just want to get on with their lives peacefully and focus on their personal hopes and their families. So our thoughts go to them, but of course, most of all, the brave citizens of Ukraine. Thank you so much. If you have any comments or words of the week you'd like to enter, or to ask about the hair products that I use, please drop us a line.
Thank you so much. And yeah.
So from
the A-Team,
it is
goodbye from
him
and goodbye from me.
Goodbye.